Sorry, I was in the inaugural address, but I think the governor is winding to a conclusion as we speak.
I was listening to some of that, and Emily, I imagine you may have your hands full in the upcoming months.
We were mentioned a little bit. Yeah.
Surprise. Okay, we have a quorum, so why don't we call the meeting to order? First item on the agenda is approval of the agenda. Any announcements? So I'll take announcements first. Hearing no announcements, do we need to amend the agenda at any point during today? Hearing nothing that needs to be amended, do we have an approval of the agenda for January 9th, 2025 as written? Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Motion and a second. All those who approve the agenda for January 9th, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The agenda is approved. Next item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes for December 12th, 2024. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
A motion and a second. Discussion on the minutes. All right. Hearing no discussion, all those in favor of approving the minutes for December 12th, 2024, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The minutes are accepted. Next item is public comment. We'll now open the floor for any public comment. And since we don't have any people here, we will close the floor for public comment. And the next item on the agenda is the VPIC presentation. Welcome, Eric.
Thank you, John. Good afternoon, everybody. Happy New Year. My name is Eric Henry. I'm Chief Investment Officer for VPIC, for those of you who don't know me. We've been doing these updates for your board now, I think twice a year for a few years, and it's a good opportunity, we think, to share with you what we're doing and hear any feedback, thoughts, concerns you all might have about what we're doing and how we're doing it. I will call out Perry, one of your members, who's been a very constructive and contributive member of VPIC. We really appreciate his contributions to our discussions and to what we do. We shared with you, I think, a copy of our annual report, which we just filed officially this afternoon. But some of the highlights are fiscal year 24 was a very strong fiscal year with a return of 10.21% net of all investment expenses, well above the 7% discount rate the actuaries use in figuring out funding requirements. Our 5-year return of 7.9, also well above the 7% actuarial assumption, ranks at or above median for the last 4 years. So we've got a pretty strong 4-year track record going now with the initiatives we've been building over the last 6 to 10 years falling into that 5-year number over the last 4-year number over the last 4 years. Our private equity program that we spent a lot of time talking with you about, especially when it comes to the fossil fuel divestment proposals we've seen over the last 2 years, has generated a 20.48% return for the 10-year period, ranking us number 1 nationally among public pension funds. So something we're very proud of. We've got a 10-year track record now, and the program, as you can see, is generating desirable results. When we look at the performance of that program since inception, that 20.48% is about 1,000 basis points in excess of what would have been available in publicly traded equity markets. So by taking advantage of the illiquidity premium in the private equity space, we've been able to add significantly to returns. We have spent a lot of time thinking about staffing and professionalizing the team. I think we've made great strides there. I know the board has spent a lot of time thinking about succession planning and compensation structures. The legislature asked us to do a compensation study a few years ago. We've done that. We've submitted it. We're asking the legislature for some assistance in implementing some of those findings. We also studied the impact of our investments in the fossil fuel industry. At the legislature's request, last February, we submitted a final report by Makita Investment Consulting, an independent consultant they asked us to hire. And they essentially affirmed our approach of, instead of divesting of fossil fuel shares, actually retaining them to engage with these companies to hold them accountable for a successful transition to a low carbon economy and to allow us to continue to invest in the transition to a low carbon economy. What I wanted to do, if I could, is share my screen and jump to the back of our report. Which, can you all see this?
Yes.
At the very back, we have some investment themes that we have been very consistent about implementing, and these are really sort of overarching principles that we use when we think about constructing the portfolio. The first one is simplify. There are only 3 investment professionals on the team here now. We've recently added a 4th person, an accountant. So a very lean team, and we've really been conscious about underwriting the level of complexity in the portfolio to a level of us that the 4 of us can understand and oversee. What we don't want to do is be surprised by any performance of our managers, either good or bad. When our managers perform either in excess of our expectations or behind our expectations, we want to understand why that is, and simplifying the portfolio has been a big driver of that. Reduced fees. We spent a lot of time calling through our portfolio lineup of active managers, particularly in the public market space. Many of their fees were too high, and they just weren't able to generate performance above and beyond their fees. So significantly reduced the number of active strategies, especially in the public equity space, indexed a large portion of our public equity exposure, again, reducing fees. Underwrite everything. Back to my point on complexity. It's critical that we understand what's in each one of our strategies and how each one of our strategies contribute to the overall portfolio goals. A good example of this is the Allianz Structured Global Alpha product that we terminated back in 2019. This was a fund that was one of our consultants' best ideas. When we underwrote it, we just didn't understand the strategy and how it pulled together, had some concerns about leverage exposures, and the board terminated it in September of 2019. 6 months later, we have COVID and the global equity market sell-off, and that fund essentially went bankrupt. So we dodged a bullet by getting out of it, not because we thought it was going to go bankrupt, but because we didn't really understand it. So what you'll find is that we understand everything in the portfolio. They won't always perform as expected, but when they don't, we understand and can explain why. Illiquidity premium increases returns. This is the justification for our private equity program and our private credit program. We've targeted 11% of the fund to each of those, and we monitor our liquidity needs very closely. We monitor our tolerance for illiquidity. By adding illiquidity to the program, we generate higher actual returns and higher expected returns. So having 22% of our fund targeted to private equity and private credit helps justify the 7% assumed rate of return that the actuaries use in valuing the plan liabilities. Again, to that end, liquidity needs must be fully understood and assured. We do annual asset allocation studies. We do more comprehensive and involved asset liability studies every 3 or 4 years. But every year we're integrating the actuarial valuations and the demographic data of the 3 pension plans into our asset allocation modeling and design work. And then finally, net returns must justify all manager fees. We've been focused on reducing fees, and you'll see that over time our investment fees have come down. That's a noble goal, but it's not the primary goal. The primary goal is to make sure that we're maximizing returns net of fees. So to the extent we're paying high fees, and we are willing to pay high fees, especially in private equity and private credit, we want to see those managers outperform what returns are available in a public market, even after those fees. So back to our private equity program, after taking into account all of the fees that we've paid there, we've generated about 1,000 basis points of outperformance since inception. Stop sharing here, but we are focused right now on modernizing our custody programs. What we have in place is left over from maybe 20 years ago, and over the last, I would say, 2 or 3 years, the capabilities of the trust custodians have evolved to the point where it now makes sense for us to take a fresh look. So we're looking at redesigning our custody programs. We are looking at implementing the findings from the Makita report. In that report, they identified four potential scenarios. Number one was do nothing. Number two was divest of all fossil fuels. Number three was decarbonize our portfolio. And number four was use our portfolio to decarbonize the global economy and invest in the energy transition. So we're focused on option four at this point, using our portfolio to decarbonize the global portfolio of the world economy, and to decarbonize our portfolio as well. And at the same time, invest in the energy transition. Spend a lot of time using our proxy votes to engage with companies to make sure they're being responsible stewards of our assets. We spend a lot of time looking at opportunities to invest in things like renewable energy infrastructure, renewable energy technologies, more sustainable electric grid. There are a lot of sort of peripheral investment opportunities that lie around the energy transition, and we think present a pretty compelling opportunity for future returns. Pleased with the results we've been able to generate. Continue to think that valuations are high globally. That will present, I think, headwinds as we continue to present headwinds as we move forward, invest in the portfolio. But it's a very dynamic environment, especially with the incoming new administration. We'll see what that brings with us. But we are long-term investors. We don't try to get too cute about trying to guess which way interest rates are going to move or which way stock prices will move. We broadly diversify and seek to maximize returns over the long run, making sure we have enough liquidity on hand in the short term to pay benefits and meet capital call obligations, all at a level of risk that the commissioners are comfortable with. We've covered a lot of ground. They're happy to take any questions or take the discussion off in any direction.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this is maybe a silly question, but since I don't track the portfolio that closely, sort of a narrative, is there like one particular position that's performed, beyond expectations that you could tell us about? And sort of the converse, is there one particular position that is really underperformed that you could tell us about?
So I could start at the macro level, and private equity is a good example of a program that's, I would say, exceeded our expectations. We expected to capture an illiquidity premium. We typically expect that to be 300 to 400 basis points over what's available in public markets. We've seen 1,000. Part of that, I think, is reflective of the low interest rate environment that we lived through until 2 years ago or so. Having interest rates at levels where they are today probably mean those returns are not as strong going forward. Still well in excess of public market returns, we think, but probably not to that level. For a long time, these private equity funds essentially had the benefit of free leverage, and those days are behind us now. The interest rates are higher than they had been for a long time, but potentially back to what are more normal levels historically. In terms of things that haven't met our expectations, there's really only one strategy in the portfolio that I would say has been, I would call a problem child, and that is our core real estate fund. We've been invested in this core real estate fund for a very long time. It had performed to our expectations for a very long time. It was a very conservatively managed fund of core office buildings in Class A markets, some retail, some residential, some industrial. And what happened was in line with our expectations, they managed their leverage levels pretty conservatively, which is what we wanted from them. Their peers, however, took on a lot more leverage and began to look more like what we would call core plus funds. So they took on a more risky profile. That paid off. Their returns exceeded those being generated by our fund. And the consulting community lined up in support of those funds that took on more risk, and lined up against the funds that took less risk because the returns were lower. As that happened, investors in this fund redeemed, and there became an exit pool, and we find ourselves coming into the COVID markets where suddenly everybody's working from home and nobody knows what office buildings are worth. And the fund put up gates and said nobody can get out unless and until we begin to sell some of these assets. So they're working through that process now. They had sought to realign the core portfolio to better reflect the new realities of a post-COVID economy. They have been, I would say, less, their plans were sounded better than they ended up being as they implemented them. They've been slower to implement. We are in their redemption pool. That exposure has been going down. But, you know, this is one of those things where we invest in a fund, we understand how they're managing it, we understood why it wasn't performing like the others. It was still meeting our expectations until there was a rush to the exits. Once the consultant said, we recommend clients get out of this fund, everybody lines up and wants out, and now the portfolio team's distracted trying to raise liquidity to pay off the folks that wanted to get out.
Thank you. That's very helpful. Is there any idea of timing when, or is that just who that? I don't know, are they selling their, I assume they must be trying to balance what selling assets quickly versus getting a fair price for
They are.
assets.
They've
Yeah.
essentially carved the portfolio into two pieces. One they call core, and that's essentially for anybody that wants to stay in the fund, gets exposure to that pool. If you want to redeem, you go into the redemption pool, and there are non-core assets that have been carved off and put into that pool and are being marketed for sale, but are being sold off slowly. So they're not fire selling these assets. Our best guess is it probably takes us 4 years to get out of this fund. You know, the properties are cash flowing at this point, so it's not like we're not hemorrhaging money or anything like that. It's just locking up money in the asset allocation that we might currently be deploying better into things like infrastructure. So this is a good example of the reason why we think of our portfolio in three broad classes of assets. Many investors will look at, you know, will have 20 different asset classes: private equity, private credit, public equity, bonds. We have three. We have growth assets, we have inflation hedging assets, and we have downturn hedging assets. So this fund, the core real estate fund, sits in the inflation hedging bucket. Where this makes a difference is if we lose confidence in a strategy in the inflation hedging bucket, for example, this core real estate fund, we're not rushing out to find another core real estate fund to replace it. We're looking for an inflation hedge to replace it. That might be TIPS, that might be infrastructure, that might be farmland, that might be anything else that we think will hedge inflation. We're moving away from core real estate strategically because we just don't know how to underwrite it and we don't know how to price it given what's happening, especially in office and retail.
That's very helpful, Eric. Thank you.
Other questions? All right, Eric, thank you so much.
Thank
Again, I
you.
agree with your opening remarks. It's been great having you VPIC come twice a year to give us updates. This has been fantastic.
We appreciate the opportunity. Thank you all. Take care and Happy New Year.
Same to you. Okay, next item on the agenda is the budget overview.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to make a couple introductory remarks, and then I'll hand it over to Jeremiah to do a walkthrough. The budget process is largely run by Jeremiah and his team. So most of the time when I'm talking about what the retirement division is doing, that does not include Jeremiah. He's our CFO and runs the operations team here in the treasurer's office. So, you know, his team provides really significant and very important services to the retirement division. So it's also a great opportunity for you guys to see and talk with Jeremiah. They do our financial reporting. As I said, they do our budget process, and so strong partners in the sort of mechanics of administering these systems. The budget that you have before you shows. Actually, I didn't think about it before, but an ominous bottom line number of 6.66% increase. But notwithstanding that numerical oddity, it's a very reasonable budget increase. And as you'll see when Jeremiah walks through, there's a couple things that might look like standouts, but there is some geography changes in this budget where we're moving a cost from one place to another. So, one looks like a dramatic decline, another looks like a dramatic increase. But we're trying to make it a little bit more intuitive where some of the costs are showing up. And really the top line of the driver of the increase here is consistent across state government, and it's the cost of salaries and benefits. We have health insurance costs this year for state employees going up about 15%. We have wage and salary growth, step increases, and so the lion's share of the increases are there. There are some other things that you'll, I'm sure, expect, such as our hosting costs with LRS now that we're moving to add that service with LRS. So the top line drivers are pretty well known and understood, but Jeremiah will walk through at a high level the budget, and then we can go to any questions. At the end of this discussion, we would request that the board consider a motion to approve the budget.
All right. So good afternoon, everybody. As Tim mentioned, I'm Jeremiah Breer. I'm the CFO of the State Treasurer's Office, and as Tim had also mentioned, one of the duties that my team does is we provide financial and financial management services to the retirement system. So we do the financial statement, the audit, the budget, banking and cash management and disbursement services. And so I am here to talk to you about the VSTRS budget. And I think the best way probably to handle it is I will go over the major variances versus last year's budget, and then I will open it up for any questions. So if you have the budget in front of you, the first change, you'll see there is a line that says VPIC administrative support, and that is up a little bit more than 3%, or about $35,000. That is, of course, the cost that we pay to VPIC for investment services, and those costs are shared among the 3D plans, DB plans. And so that 3% increase is the proportional share that VSTRS is paying based on VSTRS' proportional share of the assets that are managed. And so those increases represent the increase in the cost of VPIC. And then the next line that has a change, you'll see the actuarial is down 64,000, or about 30%. And as Tim had prefaced, that is largely due to changes in geography. So we had moved some items out of this line into some other lines, which you'll see increases in as we go through the walkthrough here. And also, Tim would probably be the best person to talk in detail about what is involved in that actuarial line. But I also believe that there were some reports, or maybe one report last year that was on a 3-year cycle that is not needed this year. And so that also contributes to the decrease.
Jeremiah, I can just give
go ahead.
the real quick bullet there is that we wanted to, Steve May's health consultant contract had previously appeared in the actuarial line. And when we have a health consultant line, it seemed a heck of a lot more intuitive to put it there. So you're seeing a $70,000 contract move from the actuarial line to the health consultant line, and that explains the increase there. So no longer is health consultant just the medical review board and our independent hearing officer. It also includes Steve May. And then the reason why it's not a $70,000 decrease in actuarial is because we do have some added costs for some of the work we plan to do with Siegel with the risk assessment and just updating for this year's expected Siegel contract costs. So that's what that one is.
Thanks, Tim. And then moving down under the agency support section, you'll see that the Attorney General and Auditor accounts, those charges are charges that we pay to other state agencies, and we expect those to be flat. However, the Human Resources line is our fee to the Vermont Department of Human Resources. On a dollar figure, it's not up very much. It's about $1,000, but on a percentage-wise basis, you'll notice that it's up about 11%. And that is a cost that is given to us that we really have no control over, but it is driven largely by the cost of labor at the Department of Human Resources, and that 11% is in line with what other state agencies are seeing with increases in their budgets due to the increases in costs of compensation and benefits. And then Tim kind of already covered the health consultant piece is up 70,000. It's a very startling percentage increase because this line didn't have very much in it last year, but that is, as Tim mentioned, moving those expenses from the actuarial line into the health consultants. Similarly, the technical professional line is down about $12,000, or roughly a 25% decrease. And that is largely due to moving some items out of that line, mostly into the retirement system information technology line. So you'll see that is up 56,000, or about 55%. And that is due to the LRS contract now being in that line as opposed to technical and professional. And additionally, there is added costs to the LRS contract for hosting services. And then if we go down under the office and administrative support, I will call your attention to the first two lines. There's one that says administrative support, and there's another one that says administrative support dash OPEB. And what both of these lines are is the cost of Office of the State Treasurer staff who are providing services to the retirement system. So we all of us who work on something retirement related have a portion of our salaries and benefits allocated to the retirement system. And this is the portion that VSTRS would be paying both for the administrative support in general. And then we have now specifically been allocating some costs to the OPEB plans in relation to the time that staff spends there. And it's a little bit funky from a percentage-wise standpoint, because if you notice that the administrative support is 5%, and then the administrative support OPEB is up 40%, and that really just is the result of us getting some shifts in the way that the costs are allocated to more accurately represent where people are actually spending their time. And so if you compare in total these two lines, if you look at the 2025 budget for administrative support and administrative support OPEB, if you add that 1.4 million and the 200,000 together, and then you compare it to the total this year of the 1.465 and the 303, basically if you take the net of those two lines, it's up in total about 10%. And again, that's in line with what we're seeing for labor costs throughout state governments. So Tim had sort of already mentioned this, but there is a cost of living increase. Folks have scheduled step increases. The health insurance is up about 15%. And then also several other, benefits are tied as a percentage of folks' compensation. So those increase. Likewise, our contributions to the state retirement system, FICA, et cetera. And so that is what is driving the cost there. And then in this section, you'll see there's a line that says insurance, employee related. There's a line that says ADS allocated and other charges, a line that says fee for space, and a line that says FMS vision assessment. Those are all color coded in a sort of salmony color. And those are other costs that we are paying to other agencies of state government. And again, those are just sort of given to us, and we really have no say or control over those costs. And so those are representing the increases of costs of services from those departments. And so if you put it all together, you're looking at a total increase of 237,000, or on a percentage basis, we arrive at the mark of the beast there, unfortunately, 6.66%. So that is an overview of the budget in total, and happy to open it up for any questions if you'd like to go into anything in more detail.
I just have one question about the OPEB. So the administrative cost for OPEB, is VPIC doing work with OPEB in terms of the investing of that, or is it Treasurer's Office?
They are not. So Mike Pichak is the sole trustee of the OPEB funds, and so that my team, the Treasury Operations team, in consultation with Tim and with Becky Wasserman and with Mike, we largely manage those. It's largely my team sort of administering the day-to-day operations of the investments for the OPEB plans. We do consult with VPIC from time to time if advice is needed, and legislatively, it's sort of the statute that gives us authority to invest is set up such that the portfolio that we are investing in largely mirrors the VPIC portfolio. There are some asset classes that both because of a slightly different tax classification of an OPEB plan versus a DB plan, and also because of the relative size of the OPEB plans versus the DB plans, they're obviously quite smaller. There are some times where we are not able to get into exactly the same investment vehicle for whatever the asset allocation is, and we are in those cases in something very similar. But except for in those exceptions, we are actually literally in the same investment vehicles as VPIC is in.
Excellent, thanks.
And John, just one further point on that. Every year, we do renew a contract, a memorandum of agreement with VPIC that sort of formalizes that ability to get into some of those classes. So while it's Jeremiah, leads the management of that very capably, it is a very productive relationship with VPIC when and if we need to kind of compare notes and kind of be able to take advantage of their scale and expertise in the space.
That's what I thought. I remember having a conversation about that, and I wasn't too sure what the integration was. So that was very helpful. Thank you, Jeremy.
I will also add just one additional piece that we have an investment consultant that provides us advice and administrative support on this, RBK, and that is also the same firm that VPIC uses for exactly the same services. So there's also a tie-in in that respect.
Excellent. Other questions? All right. Do we have a motion to accept the budget?
So moved.
And a second?
Second, Dan.
So we have a motion and a second to approve the FY 2026 budget. Further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving the fiscal year 2026 budget, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? The budget is approved.
Well, thank you all.
Thanks,
Thank
Jeremiah.
you. Next item on the agenda is key updates on the Vermont Public Pension Memo.
So I'll take this and then maybe kick it over to Gavin for a little bit. But what we just wanted to bring to the board's attention was, and you may have seen some of the press on this, I know Bill shared it. On Tuesday, we held a press conference here to basically take a look back at Act 114. I think everyone remembers those days, very difficult days of the actual passage of that act, but actually the culmination of a couple difficult years following the 2020 experience study when the assumed rate of return went down and the unfunded liabilities went up. Act 114 was really a milestone. We're still actually implementing some pieces of it. There's still a few employee contribution increases to come, COLA changes that we're still working through on a practical level, but from an achievement, the dollar savings and sort of a tripartisan solution perspective, it was really a remarkable achievement. And so Mike had the idea to kind of take stock, look back on it, and just reflect on the gains that we've made. And so on Tuesday, we gathered here in the Pavilion building with some of the union leaders, Secretary of State Copeland Hanses, who was the co-chair of the Pension Design Task Force, was on hand. Some of the key legislators involved in passing the bill were on hand. And it was a really, I think, important event just to emphasize, as at the start of the legislative session, the progress that we've made and the importance of staying the course. I think if Mike had a top line message, it was just that progress has been made. And now let's stay the course and commit to following through on all the promises in Act 114. We did an analysis here in the Treasurer's office in advance, and Mike tasked us with trying to illustrate what the savings are. And so we looked at what the deferred what the amount of money that taxpayers would not need to come up with over the life of the two amortization periods. So through 2038 for the pensions and through 2048 for OPEB. And that's summed to about $5.8 billion. So a lot of that is taking advantage of the compound return on these early investments that we're going to be making, that we have made and will continue to make over the years. But it's really a remarkable savings to Vermonters and a shoring up of our systems. And so a good moment to celebrate that achievement. You have the some of the press coverage that we received on it. And I think it was a really great event. And Gavin, I'll turn it over to you for any thoughts you have on it.
Yeah, thanks, Tim. And I'm sorry, everyone, for being late. It was inauguration day, as Tim might have mentioned. And I was boxed in on the House floor. So yeah, so I was struck by a few things, having not been present, as many of you were, for the history of this. The more I learn about it, and the more we brought people. We're thinking about who we needed to bring together to really tell the story of the history here. I kept thinking, it really takes a village to get this done, and hearing about particularly the stories of retirees and employees who depend on these systems, and their role in motivating both the formation of the task force and in influencing its course was I thought really powerful, and some of that came through in the media coverage. And the other thing I'll say, I think I think the treasurer would agree with this, that it felt important to advance a story about government functioning well and doing something purely for the benefit of average folks, and talking honestly about the difficulties of doing that and the challenges and the importance of it going forward. So I think that we'll do it again. I think to be a good discussion about kind of how frequently something like this is worth doing, and barring sort of big sudden news. I think we're thinking maybe a cadence of kind of every couple of years, like a big public update. Obviously we do we do more frequent updates for the legislature, at least annually, but this felt like a good exercise, and probably sort of a good piece of transparency hygiene, to let Vermonters know how we're doing. So yeah, I really appreciated all the work that went into getting it done, and all the work that folks have done over the years. I think and I think that was reflected in the coverage. So yeah, thank you all. I mean, it really takes a village on this stuff. So
I think, we've had this discussion about sharing the institutional knowledge of what went into this and the outcome, and especially with the new legislature coming in and a lot of new committee chairs and changes within the legislature this year. I think it was really important. I think you did a fabulous job setting the tone of the importance of this, not to forget how monumental this was, Act 114, and how successful it's been. So I think the timing was excellent, and I think the presentation and the news that news media that picked it up, I think it's all positive. Any other comments, questions? Excellent, thank you. And last item, any other business come before the board?
John, I have two items, if I could just raise. Sure. The first is kind of to jump off this discussion. We are about to start the new legislative session. And so in that capacity, folks on this board might approach for information, questions, anything like that. I just wanted to offer our support. If you have folks in your circles that have questions about what is happening with the pensions, and any of the coverage from the press conference, anything like that, we're ready to provide help and assistance to help you either answer those questions or to you can always refer people to us to answer any questions. I think we have a good story to tell, and we're always eager to tell it. So I just wanted to put that plug in. If you do have questions, we're here for you. And second, we some board members on the various boards have expressed interest in maybe doing an occasional in-person meeting. And so we've started putting our heads together a little bit. And at present, we're targeting May as a possible in-person meeting. That will be one of our Empower meetings. And we're trying to put our heads together on what might be on it. We'd have Empower. We might think about a training that we could roll into that, but also have an opportunity for people to kind of get back in a room together. If always we'll have a remote option as well, but we just thought it might be a good idea once or twice a year to have that in-person meeting. So I wanted to flag that we're in that it would be we would want to make sure all 3 board meetings were close in time, because if we're going to have Empower, for example, come out physically, we would not want to have them fly out 3 times. So might be some scheduling tweaks on that, but if folks see value in this, I think we would plan on trying to come up with a proposed agenda, within the next month or so, so folks can get this on their calendars well in advance. And as I said, always a remote option too. But does that feel reasonable to folks?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, great. So we might try and target something a little longer, just to give us the opportunity to spend a little time together, and yeah, be a good time to kind of hopefully celebrate that this was an uneventful session for the pension systems. Perhaps not in other areas.
Excellent. Yeah. Stay tuned. Any other business before the board?
I just wanted to, if I could, Mr. Chair, give a brief staffing update.
Sure.
So I believe I mentioned, or Tim may have at a prior meeting, that we got legislative authority last session to hire a director of risk management, which is in part an office-wide job and in part a retirement-focused job. So Tim and our director of unclaimed property did a first round of interviews just before the holidays, just before the new year. And I have now completed the second round of interviews. We've got 3 really strong candidates, and we're hoping to extend an offer soon and onboard someone, late January, early February, depending. So I think it's good news for us. As I said, there are retirement specific aspects of what we'll be looking for from this role, and also, office wide aspects. So just want to give an update on that, and any questions I'm happy to answer.
Good timing with the upcoming risk assessment work that we've been thinking of doing too. So it'll fit in well.
Excellent. Any other announcements? I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
There we have a motion and a second. All those in favor of adjournment, please say aye.
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 Objections? We are adjourned. Excellent. Thanks so much, everybody. And if you're driving, drive safely. It's a little greasy out there, at least in Chittenden County. Thank you. Take care.